like 30 miles an hour the wrong direction. I had an accident. Route 117. Are there any injuries? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of kids.
Have you ever found out a disturbing secret about a loved one that seems so out of character it is hard to accept as the truth? A woman named Diane Schuler, who led herself as well as several others, including her own children, into a deadly car crash, appears to have secrets of her own that to this day have not fully come to light. Was Diane drunk, high, or suffering from a serious medical condition that caused her to drive on the opposite side of the highway? Today we will be going over the 2009 Taconic State Parkway crash and hopefully speculate on what happened in this bizarre accident. Diane Schuler was born November 13, 1972 in Floral Park, New York. She was the only girl and had 3 brothers, and when Diane was a young child, her mother left the family, and that was often a sore topic for her and one that she often avoided. Diane barely spoke of her mother throughout her life, and even when her brothers reunited with her mother years later, she chose to not do so. It seems as if Diane wanted to ignore this topic in her life and not deal with her emotional baggage. Despite having a hard time as a child, Diane was a great mother, and she was greatly loved by her husband Daniel and her children Aaron and Brian. Diane was very hands-on with her children's school. She was organized, and Daniel said she was the boss of the household and that she took care of everything. Diane and her family were happy. Friends and family regarded her as a good mom and even was trusted to take her 3 nieces on a camping trip with her kids and her husband at Hunter Lake Campground in Parksville, New York. This park is located in the Catskill Mountains and is a very popular destination for families to visit throughout the summer. It has beautiful trails and many fun activities for families and friends to enjoy together. On a warm Sunday morning of July 26, 2009, Daniel woke up in the early morning at around 6 a.m. to get ready to head home from his family's camping trip. Daniel cleaned his boat and then woke up Diane around 7, where she then got ready for the day and then woke up her own children and her nieces Emma, Allison, and Kate. The family cleaned up their campsite and packed everything up in both of their cars. Daniel and Diane drove separately because of all the children and camping gear. It was necessary to take 2 vehicles. Daniel drove his truck home with much of the equipment and the family's dog, while Diane drove the children in a 2003 Ford Windstar minivan she borrowed from her brother for the trip. Diane left the campgrounds with the children in tow at around 9:30 a.m. and they took a stop at McDonald's for breakfast in West Babylon. The workers at McDonald's later stated that Diane was acting completely normal and in no way seemed intoxicated or delirious, and that she was just a regular customer who came in that morning. Diane then drove to a local gas station, and in the surveillance footage appears normal as well. It is believed that she may have been having some tooth pain at this time, but the gas station did not have the pain reliever she needed, so she left without making a purchase. At around 11 a.m., Diane started driving along Interstate 86 and 87. Local police started receiving reports from witnesses at this time stating that a driver in a red minivan was speeding, tailgating, and overall driving recklessly. At 11:37, Diane called her brother Warren, who was the father of her nieces she took along to the camping trip, and let him know that they would be running a bit later than she originally told him because the traffic was backed up. Just a few minutes later at 11:45, witnesses saw Diane pulled over on the side of the road, and it appeared that she was bent over and that she might be vomiting. Shortly after that, she was seen sick again at a rest stop by other witnesses. Normally while traveling, most people seem to mind their business, so it does seem reasonable to me that no one asked Diane what was wrong and if she was feeling okay. But she did appear to make a few stops within a short amount of time, and she was clearly having a problem. At around 1 p.m., Warren received another phone call from Diane's phone, but this time it was his daughters telling him that there was something wrong with Aunt Diane. Warren and his wife Jackie became worried after speaking to their daughter, and then Diane briefly before she hung up or the call became disconnected. Diane then left her phone on the ground on the side of the highway and drove off. Warren tried to call back several times, but of course got no answer. It is at this point the facts of this case become muddled because no one really knows what was going on with Diane at this point, and I can imagine the children were very scared because Diane seemed to be acting odd for quite some time. 911 was then called to report that Diane was potentially having a medical issue and that there were children in the car. At 1:30 p.m., police again received reports from witnesses saying Diane was driving off the side of the road. She was driving north at this point and came up to an exit ramp. This exit ramp had two separate signs, one that said one way and the other one said do not enter. Diane should have been aware of this while reading the signs, and while everyone does sometimes make mistakes while driving, it is clear that Diane either did not care or she was in some sort of delirious state and did not realize she took the wrong ramp. Within minutes, there were 4 911 calls reporting a red minivan driving down the wrong side of the highway head-on into traffic. What is confusing though at this point is that Diane was not driving recklessly or swerving, she was driving straight, and witnesses claimed that she had a straight face as if she was just driving normally. At this time she was driving around 75 to 80 miles an hour. Diane ended up driving 1.7 miles in the wrong direction before she crashed into a 2004 Trailblazer, which then struck a 2002 Chevrolet Tracker. At first, there were 2 men who saw smoke coming out of the minivan, and they began pulling the children out. At first, they believe everyone in the vehicle had died on impact, but eventually Diane's son Brian was pulled out. Brian was underneath his cousin's and sister's bodies and luckily survived the crash before any sort of fire started. It was determined by police that the children were not even wearing seat belts while Diane was driving, they were just free roaming all over the back seat. One of Warren's daughters was rushed to the hospital but unfortunately ended up passing away while she was being treated. Diane, her daughter Erin, and all 3 of her nieces died in this accident. There were also 3 men driving in the Trailblazer named Michael Bastardi, who was 81, his son Guy, who was 49, and their friend Dan Longo, who was 74 years old. All 3 men also died, and the 2 people in the Chevy Tracker sustained injuries. Brian was treated at the hospital for several months after the accident. He had several broken bones and now has a condition called ocular motor nerve palsy, which occurs from the damage in the 3rd cranial nerve. This condition affects the eyes by dilated pupils, sluggish reactions, and eyes positioned downward and outward. The funerals took place on July 30th, and it was a challenging time for everyone in the family. The shock and not knowing what was going on in the car that day had everyone tense. Everyone was speculating what could have been wrong with Diane, and behind the scenes, police were forming their official reports. A bottle of vodka was found in the passenger seat floor. It was broken, but that sparked the theory that Diane may have been under the influence of something. Daniel was at the time and is still adamant that Diane was not a heavy drinker, but she occasionally smoked marijuana. The toxicology report that was released on August 4th by Westchester County Medical Examiners, and it was determined that Diane's blood alcohol content was 0.19%, with approximately 6 grams of alcohol in her stomach that was not yet absorbed into her blood. Diane also had high levels of THC in her system. Daniel denied Diane had consumed any alcohol or illegal substances on their camping trip because the children were with them. He later changed his story and stated that Diane never drank to excess and that she would have never purposely gotten drunk while she was driving, especially with her own children and nieces in the car. Daniel received a lot of backlash from the media, claiming that he was covering for his wife, but many members of the family and friends spoke to media outlets and said that they have never seen Diane drunk. Larry King even pressed Daniel, stating that Diane may have been a private drinker. Daniel has since done major research into what could have possibly happened with Diane. There are several theories that include Diane suffering from an abscessed tooth, which could have affected her brain function, or that she may have suffered from gestational diabetes, which is more common in pregnancy, but it can happen from consuming a large amount of carbohydrates and they turn into alcohol in your stomach. And of course, on camping trips, everybody consumes a lot of junk food, potato chips, burgers, treats, ice cream, all of those things. And Diane also had McDonald's that day, so I'm sure in the days prior to this accident, she did consume a very large amount of carbohydrates, as well as having a little bit to drink that may have also contributed to this. Daniel even accepted a $100,000 deal from HBO for a documentary where Diane's body would be exhumed and further testing could be conducted to come to a conclusion to see what exactly may have happened, but this never ended up happening, and other media outlets have made documentaries and features about this case. The family has had several internal issues where Warren and his family have attempted to sue Daniel and vice versa. The Bastardi family has also attempted to sue Daniel, but all lawsuits have been dropped. The Child Passenger Protection Act was signed into state law on November 18, 2009 because of the public outcry from this case. and also another drunk driving case that took place in October of that year. Warren and his wife Jackie suffered greatly after losing all 3 of their daughters, and they ended up having another baby a few years later and creating the Hance Family Foundation, which helps children through self-esteem based educational programming.
Her friends convinced her to rejoin their early morning runs, and after a while they even suggested she think about having another child to help her heal. She refused to even consider the idea, feeling she was too broken to be a mother again. And besides, technically it wasn't possible because she had had her tubes tied. But her friends persisted and got her to a fertility specialist. So you tried?
I tried.
And?
I got pregnant.
On October 11, 2011, Casey Rose arrived.
This case has been a topic of frustration to the public as well as Daniel and his family for many years. It was out of character for Diane to be drunk while driving her children, and to this day it is believed, despite the toxicology report, that Diane suffered from some sort of medical issue that caused delirium and she did not know what she was doing. What do you think? Do you think Diane maybe suffered some sort of psychotic break and drank heavily that day, or do you think she suffered from a rare medical issue? I personally do not believe that Daniel deserves as much backlash as he has received over the years. He seems like a good person who loved his wife and children greatly. If he was for some reason covering for Diane, and if she did have an alleged drinking problem, of course that is not right, but I do believe that he was trying to preserve his family's memory in a positive light, and I do not believe that he was lying about that. If Diane did suffer some sort of issue that day where she did decide to drink heavily due to mental health or some other problem that she had, as in a medical issue, I do feel that Diane most likely was not a heavy or a private drinker. I hope one day that the families can receive some sort of closure from this tragic accident and we can finally find out what happened on that day to Diane Schuler. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will leave information below about the Hance Family Foundation if you would like to support the family, and I hope you found this video informative and helpful. Stay safe out there, guys, and have a great day.